Good morning, folks. I'd like to talk to you guys today about conflict resolution. Throughout my career, there have been times where people get aggravated and I'd have to mediate between two parties. Sometimes it'd be a supervisor or one of the guys working for him. Sometimes it'd be two supervisors that didn't see eye to eye on how a thing was supposed to happen. Sometimes it'd be my boss getting aggravated that something wasn't being taken care of in the manner that he thought it needed to be taken care of. You know, the job that we have can be stressful, especially when you're dealing with the public. Oh, and that's another one. Talking to the public and getting them to understand that we're doing what we can and it can't happen instantly, or there's no magic solution to just make this work right now. We've got to follow a process. I think one of the biggest things for me has been to try your best to remove your emotional take on things. Because, like, I see my guys out there working and busting their hump. And so if my boss gets aggravated that something's not happening fast enough, and I say my boss, the boss I have today, or every other boss that I've had in the past since I've been working in the water and wastewater field. And so emotionally, when they ask the question, why hasn't this been done yet? Well, of course, in your head, the implied question is, why aren't you doing what you're supposed to do? But you've got to remove that emotional response. You cannot let that be your initial reaction, because then you're just reacting and you're snapping at your boss, which is not a good idea. And so you got to take a breath and, all right, boss, let me look into it and I'll get back with you and let you know what happened. And you go and talk to the guys and figure out, oh, well, they didn't get it done because it was a parts issue, or they didn't get it done because this lady came out of the house screaming that she didn't want them on their grass and ran them out of the yard, or we're on hold because we had to call in a 811 Dottie and we're waiting on that to clear. And then once you're able to explain it thoughtfully, usually the boss is like, oh, okay, I get it. Problem solved. Everyone's understanding the situation. Sometimes you'll have, or I've had a couple of supervisors working for me that didn't see eye to eye on a thing. I find it's best to sit down with each one and take me through what's going on. What are your concerns? And they'll lay out what their concerns are. And I've found over and over and over again that, I mean, you're both doing the same job. A lot of times the concerns are the same. The perspective is a little different, because we humans, every one of us takes things from our unique perspective, and it's really helpful to be able to step back from that and to try and see it from the other guy's perspective. And when you can look at both sides of the coin, you find out that, you know what, the issues that you're having and the issues that you're having are really pretty much the same issue. So what do we need to do to help you see eye to eye and work through it? Perfect example, the other day, one of my supervisors asked me about another supervisor who was doing some flushing and is working some after hours stuff and is needing extra help. And so he's borrowing guys from the other supervisor's crew to come and help it. And he's like, man, I just, is all this overtime legit? And I don't want to get in trouble. And okay, that's valid, And so I went and talked to the other supervisor and, hey, there's a concern that's been raised about the overtime, and I'm not trying to stop you from getting overtime. I'm not fussing at you, but it is a valid concern. So let's make sure that we're keeping real good logs on what's happening so we can explain it to anyone who has questions. Oh, okay, yeah, that's easy, boss, no problem. Because I know that the guy that's working on these calls after hours, these flushing calls, he might get one call out that's, hey, we've got you know a water quality issue in this neighborhood. Well, he gets over there and talks to the person and realizes that, okay, if this person's having a problem, there's a good chance that the neighbors are. So he goes and talks to two or three neighbors, and he figures out that this section of this neighborhood is having a little bit of a water quality issue. And so we need to increase flushing in that area. And so then he spends time talking with the other neighbors, and then he spends time maybe flushing 5 or 6 areas around this neighborhood to get a good flush throughout this entire segment, rather than just flushing right in front of this lady's house to increase her water quality. Well, maybe if we do it in this whole neighborhood, that's the better solution. So he's only got the one call on the call log, but he's actually putting in 6 or 8 hours worth of work that wasn't being logged. Well, let's log that down. Let's make sure we capture that, just so that you can show what you've been doing. If any of these guys that you're asking to come and help you after hours are making a little bit of overtime, overtime's always questioned by the people that pay the bills, and rightly so. I mean, if you're an accountant and why are we doing all this overtime? There should be a good reason for that. We shouldn't be just paying overtime willy-nilly. I get that. So let's make sure we log this and keep everybody, informed of what's happening. And oh yeah, that's the one guy's like, yeah, no problem. CYA, I got it. And then the other guy is, oh, okay, yeah, as long as he's documenting it properly and we're all good, then I'm good. So, and just a quick little, 30 minutes worth of having a couple of conversations easily was able to resolve an issue that could have turned ugly. If these guys aren't seeing eye to eye, and the one guy is thinking that the other guy is making accusations, and the one making the accusations isn't really trying to make accusations. He just wants to make sure that he's not getting his men in any bind. But a lot of times I've had a situation before where we need another person at a facility because the lab work, the amount of lab work we were doing in that facility when I started at that facility, we were running about 6 or 8 tests a day. It was pretty simplistic, just short little lab work. So first thing in the morning, you go pull some samples, you run some lab work, and you send the samples off. What to do? Send your results off to a couple of different people within the company, and you move on with your day. You go to do maintenance, and so the guys working at that facility were doing maintenance and they were doing the lab work. But the longer I was there, the more we kept finding some issues with the process. And because there were issues with the process, we needed to do some additional testing to make sure that we were capturing what the problem was. I mean, the only way to find out what the issue is to get more data points, right? And when I say 5 or 6 tests, we had 5 or 6 tests on like 5 different streams, 5 different points in the system. So, total, you'd have a little thing of test tubes. You'd have about 20 tests you were running. Well, as we progressed, those 5 or 6 points turned into like 15 or I don't know, maybe like 17 different points at 5 tests apiece. We were running a bunch of tests, and then we had a quad hit, and so we running tests on that. In addition, we'd have 24-hour samplers online instead of a one jug that pulled 24 hours with a sample. We actually broke it down into 24 sample bottles. So we did that a few times. That wasn't every day, but we'd do it for like a week. And then, anyway, it got to be that the lab work turned into a full-time job. And so then I had to go to my administration and request a new employee for the lab. And, of course, in order for them to feel comfortable with that, I've got to go and show all this additional testing and the time that it takes to do that, and make the case for why there needed to be another person. Just standing there saying, I want more people, I want more people. I mean, the accountants have got to show that there is a need to spend this money. The plant manager needs to show his bosses why there is a need to increase the employee count in this department. Then you've got to understand those things going in. Getting mad at your boss because he's not giving you what you need. Well, I mean, you've got to give him a good understanding of the need. You've got to give him a package to bring to his boss to say, this is the need. Especially if you're working in an area that is not the biggest part of the operation. That operation was a production facility. I was running the wastewater plant. So those guys knew production. They knew that facility. None of them were wastewater experts. They really didn't have much of knowledge of what was going on out there. It was up to me to explain that to them and not to let my emotions get involved. Just calmly lay out the case. This is what's happening, and this is what we need to do if we're going to support this mission. And once I laid that out for them, and it went through, we had 4 or 5 meetings, and once I laid it out for them, everybody understood. But too many times I've had people that around me get frustrated with, the boss is doing this or the administration is doing that, and it's always they ought to this and they ought to that, and letting your emotions run you and stomping your feet and saying they ought to do better. You need to identify the they, and you need to provide an actionable plan that somebody can work with. You can't just go into your boss's office and, listen here, you dumb SOB, this is what you got to do. How do you think that conversation is going to go, really? I know how I'd go if you came at me like that. I'd tell you to go pound sand. If you want other folks to work with you, you've got to approach them with a workable idea, not just ranting and raving and being angry. There's a time for everything, but the ranting and raving and being angry thing, you do that in the afternoon, just vent a little bit, but then think it through and decide on a course of action and put a little bit of a plan together and then present that plan up the chain, and you'll oftentimes get a lot better response. Just my thoughts for the day, guys. You can't let your emotional aggravation in the moment control the conversation, because then you're not getting anywhere. You're not making progress. I love you guys. God bless, and have a good day.